I always find it interesting how Christians are still trying to play the persecution role, even in today's time when Christianity has been in charge for over a millennium. But so my man here is this whole thing started out because my guy here was saying that the priest was wrong about the church that's in Ethiopia, that the people were hiding from persecution. This church was built during the 5th and 6th century. This is a time frame when a few hundred years have went by that the Roman Empire was completely Christianized, as well as the Ethiopian Empire had, well, the Aksumite Empire, which became the Ethiopian Empire, which was completely Christianized for a couple of hundred years. So there was no Christian persecution, is what I was trying to explain to him. That historically, during this time frame, the government was in support of Christianity, and all people in those governments had to be Christian. So there was no persecution going on in Ethiopia for Christians, and so that is not the reason why it was built. Uh, the priests saying that it was built because they said that upon this rock I will build my church, and they took that literally, is what it is. And who are you to tell other people why they did something in their country, their history? Isn't that something that's been continuously done by colonizers, to tell people what their history is? But he didn't just stop there, and we continued after I told him that no, your perspective on history is, because then he said that government rule had very little on preventing persecution. This was a time of great tribulation among government rule religious beliefs, and regardless of such, we were hunted and had to hide. Again, we are talking about 5th, 6th century. This is not during the time frame of Domitian. This is not during the time frame of Vespasian or Titus or anyone of that sort. This is during the time frame after Theodosius. This is a couple of hundred years after Theodosius. Christians weren't persecuted on as a whole. And as a matter of fact, I explained to him that the people who were then persecuted during this time frame were people who was like the Marcions or the Gnostics. It was other religious groups that claimed Christianity but weren't part of the Orthodox, supported by the government, that were persecuted. So it's interesting. Christians today are trying to claim the persecution of other Christians by Christians. You see, Marcions believed in Jesus. Gnostics believed in Jesus. They just had different opinions, slightly, they had different variations, different thought process of it. And a Christian today would probably not even call a Marcion a Christian or a Gnostic a Christian. But those were the ones who were being persecuted by the Christian church. The same Christian church that became the Catholicism, that then out of Catholicism came the Protestants, the Lutherans, and all the AMEs, the Baptists, and everything else, and now the New Age. So all of it came from that group, from its core. It came from that group that was supported by the government. So you cannot take claim for Christians who were persecuted by other Christians. And I told him he needed to get his history right. And so his wise response to me was that that me repeating my nonsense is not going to make it right. It just express my bias, and that he recommends that I go and revisit the data, examine multiple credible sources, and then once I've properly researched, which only means that unless I agree with him, I will never have properly researched the topic. Then I can respond with in a valuable manner. And then he said at the end of his discussion, he said, "Sincerely, R. Wiley," or as my students call me, Professor. This is one of those things I find quite irritating, because if he was truly a professor, then he would understand that unless you're talking about very few subject matters, there are professors who are going to disagree on every subject matter. There are people who have the paper hanging on their wall for seminary, for religious studies, but yet they have disagreement. So you saying professor actually means absolutely nothing to me. Literally what you have shown is your bias, because regardless of what history actually says, in the finer details, was there Christian persecution going on during the time frame that this church was built in the 5th and 6th century? Yes. Who was doing the Christian persecution, though, was the vital part. Other Christians, through the aid of the government. Those are the finer points that your piece of paper is not allowing you to see. And for all I know, you could have a piece of paper in mathematics, in engineering, in in sociology, in psychology, in business administration. It doesn't mean a damn thing. What professorship really means to me is that act, act you have adequately repeated whatever the dogma of the school to which you got your professorship from. Whatever school that you got your degree from, you learned what they wanted you to know and you repeated it well enough for them to give you a piece of paper. You know how to take a test and study and write a paper and write a PhD if you're a true professor. If you're a PhD professor, because there are those who are professors who are not PhDs. So you're trying to flaunt your professorship, but it means absolutely nothing to your intelligence. It doesn't make you intelligent, because I know some dumbass professors, and I've out debated many dumbass professors. And if teaching at a college level makes you a professor, then guess what I am? A professor, because I used to teach at the college level. But you have a great day, and remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.